Hello and welcome to Insight Live, the IT Experts Take. I'm Jason Rader and I'll be your host today as we talk about success strategies for SAP S/4HANA change and training. We've got some experts here from Insight to help us along the journey. We have with us Jen Helgeson, who is a senior performance consultant. We have David Gall, also a senior performance consultant, and we have Michelle Sneed, a strategic solutions principal. Thank you all for joining me today. Welcome.
Thank you.
It's great to be here.
So I'd love to hear a little bit about what you guys do at Insight. Can somebody kind of give me a couple of bits about that?
Sure. We represent the Insight Change and Training team. And probably for the last 35 years, we've been focused on really driving adoption with any type of transformational initiative, right? Whether it be technology, organizational change, process change. But a sweet spot of ours is SAP. We have been delivering organizational change management, training capabilities for some of the world's largest companies for probably the last 25 years, and certainly have gathered experience, best practices, and an amazing team to help our clients deliver successful adoption.
Awesome. I know as I was prepping for this myself, I was looking at all the literature and things online. I was impressed. I actually forwarded it to a couple of colleagues. I think that's a pretty well-kept secret at Insight. Probably not so much after this particular video that we're doing today. So we've got different types of business folks that are joining us from the different platforms. I would like to, S/4HANA, for folks that are kind of very focused in what they do, from an IT perspective or a security perspective or different things like that, everybody kind of knows of it, but can somebody break it down? That might be one of the gold nuggets people get from this, is to explain the difference between ECC and S/4HANA, and kind of maybe what the benefits are, because that's also probably a valid question there as well. And we can take turns. I mean, not everybody has to hit the whole topic. It sounds like David wanted to take a shot.
Yeah, absolutely. So SAP, they really originated in the early 70s around a finance application, which they then expanded functionality to, started expanding to human resources and logistics. And over the course of really that 30-year period from like the 70s to the early aughts, they built a very mature, very in-depth application that covers really all aspects of running an enterprise. And so it's really designed to provide integrated real-time information where all of your data flows immediately, as opposed to like the legacy world where information would run in batches and would be handed back and forth between standalone systems. I guess it's 8 to 10 years ago now, they came up with an in-memory database, which is a technology which is called HANA. It is thousands of times faster than the traditional technology that the SAP platform ran on. And having developed that technology, they took advantage of having this new architecture to really revisit the design of a lot of their core applications. They developed a new web-based user interface that's a lot fresher, more intuitive for people that have grown up with web browsers. And really within each of the core applications, they've looked at how can we take advantage of this new, faster technology to rework the way the application works. So from a business user perspective, it is a big user interface change typically. And it also, even for an existing SAP enterprise, it introduces new functionality, new way of doing things, and in a lot of cases, much faster ways.
Sounds awesome. Anybody else have anything to add?
No, I think that covers it.
Well, I mean, so that sounds incredibly awesome, because I totally understand running that out of memory super fast, and then the additional capabilities and the UI sounds pretty compelling, especially if you use the older stuff. And, when people from my perspective, security and other things, there's a lot of middleware and other stuff that's involved in a lot of SAP implementations, and I know that it's a lot easier to develop against in the newer mechanism. But that also means there's a lot of change that has to take place. Even though there's awesomeness over here, it's going to take a minute to get there. And I mean, we're kind of butting up against the deadline. Who wants to talk about that? Because the folks who were kind of happy with what was going on aren't going to really have a super long runway to deal with that, are they?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, at the end of 2027, we're looking at the end of mainstream support for ECC. And if you're not familiar with that terminology, ECC is the current version or the latest version prior to S/4HANA. So with that mainstream support going away, more and more companies have on their roadmap migrating to S/4HANA within this time frame. So one of the things that we're really looking at is with this migration, there is a lot of change on the people side, and getting started early is critical to the success of these projects.
Yeah,
so go ahead.
So I was going to say, traditionally, the way SAP has been approached is organizations would look at how they do business, and they would say, all right, we have SAP. It's a very configurable system. How can we adapt SAP to work the way we work? With S4, especially with the focus on, there's a much bigger focus on rapid implementation. A lot of organizations are implementing the cloud where you may not want to do as much customization and there may not be as much flexibility. And so there's a greater focus on adoption. Well, if you're adopting your organization to do things the way S4 does things, instead of changing the system a lot, you're changing potentially your people a lot, what they do, what their expectations are, how they get things done. So there's the change management impact is magnified.
That's a great point. I think, one of the things that being in the consulting business myself, you get a lot of, this is a giant tech upgrade, but it has so much more to do with the business and the team, the teammates that'll be leveraging it than a lot of other initiatives that I can think of. And I think sometimes when you get a big project like this, not saying that anybody's doing that out there, but it gets kind of focused to the SAP folks in the business, and it doesn't necessarily get outside of that maybe, because other people are only looking at the financial aspects or the one or two, there's or maybe an IT concern, but it's kind of, those things are running separately. And I think that's where something like what you guys, the approach that you guys leverage is going to absolutely spell success. Anybody want to kind of talk about that?
Yeah, I think for us, if you're putting SAP S/4HANA on your roadmap, the time then is as soon as you put pen to paper, it's time to start talking about change management. And for us, it's not just change management around end users. And I think that's a common misconception. It's much bigger than that. It's really making sure that you've taken the time to educate every member of the team that's going to be impacted initially, as well as once you go live. And so for us, it's networking and security. It's the data team. It's looking at the project team. Do they even understand what S/4HANA can do as they're making critical business decisions for your organization? It's also about aligning leadership, making sure you're bringing the right people out of the organization and onto the team. I think you would find it interesting how long sometimes it takes to actually negotiate that, right? We've been on projects where the controller has become the business process owner for finance. Well, replacing a controller is not a small task. And so we really want to make sure at the end of the day that we're aligned on who needs to be part of that initial kind of stakeholder analysis. How do we upskill them? And how do we get them ready for the journey that, is ahead of them?
Yeah. And Michelle, there's other things there, as far as upskilling. This might be an organization's first time they are the journey to the cloud. They don't have the cloud technology out there, or they might not be familiar with agile processes. And now is the time before the project gets started to enable those people and prepare them for the work that's ahead of them.
Great point.
Right. And we often see, sorry, go ahead, David.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't think you can overstate the importance of trying to get that team together and thinking in advance about potential resource challenges. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone in the IT space that there's a skills gap in a lot of areas. And that is probably, across the industry, it's most profound in the ERP space and in the SAP space. So it can be making sure you have the right skills for your team can take longer than it traditionally has. And so, the sooner you can get the ball rolling, the better.
Well said. No, I think, Jen, you brought it up, but that whole ECC's on-prem and S/4HANA's in the cloud, right? I mean, that's a big jump. And that can shake the foundations of a lot of teams, infrastructure, IT, security, just to name a few within the organization. And I do think, a lot of organizations don't necessarily immediately go to the skills gap that exists. That's not their first thing. That they usually start thinking of the tech stack and the capabilities, and try to map one for one or whatever their approach is. But I think that's a great point, and a great point to bring up way on the front end of this thing, as opposed to getting wherever you get and then realizing that it's not operational. And that's another thing from a consultant perspective is, I think a lot of people are great at doing the thing. They're not great at operationalizing the thing, if that's fair to say. And that's where training and all of that stuff is not necessarily forefront in the mind, and it really should be part of the plan. Project management, those things part of the plan.
Yeah. One of the things that we try to emphasize when we talk to customers early on in the engagement process is start thinking about sustainment out of the gate, because as you're working on an SAP project, it's very easy as a member of the project team to kind of think of go live as the finish line. You're doing a tremendous amount of work to stand up this system to make sure you've got everything working the way it needs to. But from the perspective of your end users and how they're going to use the outcome of your work, that's really the start of the journey. And so standing up an organization that will train users over time as new people join, as people change roles or leave, incorporating updates to system updates or process changes, driven by your competitive environment or a dozen other things. That requires planning and thought. Sometimes it requires, organizations will set up a center of excellence that will help manage that process. By the time you are testing your system and getting ready for cutover, which is when people start to think about, hey, what happens after go live? It is way too late to start laying that groundwork. So even though people tend to be focused on other things early on in the project, we like to get the ball rolling so that you have a long time to plan that ongoing journey.
And Jason, you mentioned something about operationalizing. That's a great word. Operationalizing means you need to know process and technology, right? And I think a lot of times there's this rush to just make sure that you have, transactional training. We're not looking at kind of the bigger picture. And what we realize is there's so many boundary systems. There's other types of processes that input into the SAP system. And ultimately, you're retooling how people are doing kind of the common tasks that they do each and every day. And so we're really encouraging, people who are talking to us that you have to leave time for that. And in some cases, the training development and the communication is far less about what SAP can do and way more about how your role is going to change and what those processes look like. And processes can be tricky. A lot of our customers don't even truly understand their current state processes. And then we force them to make decisions about how it's going to work in the future. We've seen some great examples where leadership has done kind of process roadshows ahead of the game to really make sure that everybody's talking about how we truly do things today and how does that parallel. So operationalizing SAP is critical, and it's probably one of the things that we see, people shortchange. This is not a tech upgrade. It truly is a transformational initiative, and we need to make sure that we're planning for that.
Well said.
Yeah. It's a challenging area because you typically, when you do one of these projects, you have a core IT team that knows your architecture. You've got SAP consultants that know SAP, and you've got users out in the business that know how you do business today. but they don't necessarily know how the system is going to drive process changes. And so you have groups in these three silos that each have a piece of the puzzle. And especially, if you're working with a short time frame, you need to get the system up and running. It's easy to kind of focus on building the system without thinking of how is this actually going to run our business, and getting the information, getting those three perspectives into the room and making sure that everybody understands what they need to make the right decisions.
Yeah. In my experience, even if there was no reason to change, most people still don't have their processes well defined to begin with. And, from a maturity model perspective, you have to get to defined before you can go to the managed or optimizing phase of anything. People who want to automate, well, you can't jump straight to automation. You've got to go through be defined before you can get to automation. And I think that's one of the things where I know this isn't a tech upgrade, but just looking at the tech only aspects of the additional features that it can bring to your business you don't get to skip that effort that has to go into play to define your process and maybe redefine processes based on the capabilities of the new technology.
Yeah, absolutely. What are we getting out of the system today? How are we getting those benefits? And what do we need to do to have the new system support those and go beyond them?
And it takes a lot of workshopping, alignment,
Right.
really kind of getting your your mindset shifted. This is not about, doing things the way we always have done things. This is really about taking advantage of the power of SAP. And that itself is a change management challenge, on every single project, right? We're going to adopt the tool versus adapting it to us is something that's a real struggle for a lot of people, especially if they have expertise with implementing SAP in the past.
Understood. So what I'd like we're talking about a lot of cool stuff. Tell me, I know we've worked with clients already who have already made the commitment to do this instead of waiting until the end of the deadline here. And by the way, again, you should be thinking about this now, not later. What does it look like from that perspective? What do we do when we come in? And I know there's maybe the full buffet of things that we could do, and there's also maybe components of it. Could you take turns or share what does it look like to a business for us to come in and kind of help them?
Well, I'll start with kind of the initial planning, and then David and Jen can chime in on the what we call the realize phase. So for us, there's typically a phase 0, an explore phase, which really is trying to uncover everything that is going to have impact, whether it be system, people, could be, new roles and certainly tasks within IT. It may need to be new tool sets, right? For things like security, et cetera. There's a lot of things that need to be considered. So up front, we typically start with a consultant or two. We focus on ensuring that we're focusing on all elements of the human side of change. So it's not just the end user, right? It's the project team, it's leadership, it's the technology team. It's how do you onboard people to your organization in order for them to even participate on the project. So if you have pen to paper, it's probably an appropriate time to start thinking about how potentially a change management consultant, maybe somebody from the agile world, can help transition. Or maybe even doing some of those upfront assessments, whether it be a cloud migration workshop, kind of looking at security. There's lots of things that you can do today to get out of the way. By the time we hit Explore, we have built kind of the strategy for change management as well as training. And it's not until we hit Realize where kind of the core of our team starts. Most of our projects start with much smaller teams, but as we work to start building content and start transitioning the organization, they get much larger. So, David?
Yeah. So when I think about change management, I think of it as three complementary areas of focus. There's communicating, what is going to be changing. There is motivating. Why are we changing this? Why is it good? Why should you come along on this journey? And how are you going to do things going forward? The training focus, so that when the transition occurs, people have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to actually make the leap. Of those three, the communication and the sort of the motivation, the pure change management pieces tend to happen earlier because you have the information that you need to get started on those. And because really from the point that you start a project, you need to start thinking about communicating, because word will get out that you're working in this project. People have been pulled out of their regular jobs or are being invited to participate as they do their regular jobs. And you want to help shape the message so that you can help people understand, what is this all about? What are we doing? What will we get from it? And why is it good for you and for the organization? As well as, an early focus on things like leadership alignment, making sure that the leadership team understands what this is about and what they can do to support the effort, understanding stakeholders and how they're going to be affected so that you understand how to communicate to them. And then as you get further along in the process, as Michelle says, as you start to get to realize, which is the stage in SAP's methodology where you have your design, you kind of know what the system is going to do and how you're going to approach things. That's where you can start to build out the training materials where, all right, here's how the system is going to be built. Here's how we're going to teach people to actually use the system as it's designed. And again, back to that process communication. Here's how this particular task is going to fit into your job, into the into kind of the flow of work. Who will be affected by what I do here? Who was it that provided me the information I'm working with? So you kind of understand where you fit into the puzzle. So that's essentially, from the beginning of the realize phase to really that initial transition. Focus on the training piece really amps up over that entire period.
And David, while they're building out those training plans, I think it's really important that they think about how people want to learn today versus how we want them to learn. So meet them where they are. There are a great number of, there's a handful of performance or digital adoption platforms that can be used to be leveraged to build out not only your work instructions, but simulations and in-app help that can really help drive adoption of these, post-go live, that sustainment piece, so that people get help at the point of need. I mean, people are learning today more and more through the YouTube style videos, and we need to be able to provide that type of information to them at the point of need. I think the other key part of that sustainment piece is, and we haven't hit on it yet, is really making sure we get a group of super users, power users embedded in the project and get them embedded early so that they are familiar with the processes, the design of the system. They can get their hands in there, and they can also be part of that long-term sustainment when changes come. I mean, eventually, you're going to go live, you're going to have a system that's ready to go, and then there's going to be changes. So if you have that super user, power user group in place, what you can do is leverage that team to help sustain the training as well as the performance support, which is so important on an initiative like this.
Awesome. If we took everything about SAP out of this, everything that we're talking about is the way that you do just about any project well, right? Is you pay attention early, you see everything that affects what your business outcomes are, you put the right things in place to make sure that you get there, and then, making sure operationalizing. And I was joking, I have trouble saying that word sometimes, not you. But it's kind of consulting 101. And I always kind of think, well, and the way that consultants do is we go in and we kind of talk to people and figure out what they're trying to do and evoke that performance out of them and capture that. And then we move on from there. And, not a lot of people, some people would say, well, we have all that captured within the organization, but I will challenge everybody that says that is, it might be tribal, it might be in a bunch of 50 different locations, but you do not have it captured the way that it'll be captured for something that you're paying attention to, like a project like this. And I say project, like a transformation like this. And I think go ahead, please.
I was going to say the thing that makes SAP projects in particular challenging is just the scale. As you say, it's all the things that you would do in a good project, but you're doing it with an enterprise system that's going to touch every aspect of your business. So
that could affect your stock price if you don't do it right.
Absolutely, and it has historically. Yeah. That's sort of how the change management field evolved, was a realization that was a key element.
Well, awesome. I think we've got some people interested for sure. This is I didn't think I would want to talk about this more than the time that we have allotted, but it is super interesting to me, and I think it's very, very pivotal. This is a big juncture, if you will, in an organization, again, that could really affect their ability to move forward in a positive way. And definitely my vote is to always do this on the front end and do it properly, because the effort that you're going to put in on the back end is exponential at every can you kick down the road to try to deal with. I'd love to give you guys a shot at saying maybe some closing remarks or some words of encouragement to folks that are out there, or maybe a word of caution. I'll let you guys decide. We'll start with David. We'll go to Jen, and we'll let Michelle close.
I think all the things we've talked about today have really touched on the theme of starting to think about this early. We talk to a lot of customers before they've even really started their projects, where they come to us and say, hey, we know that we have a long way to go on this journey. We're not really sure what we're going to encounter along the way. Help us understand, what do we need to be thinking about? And I think that's the right approach, is get started early. Even if you determine, yep, we've got this totally dialed in. We have experience with ERP. We can leverage a lot of that. Whatever the case may be, it is better to confirm early that you have everything in place than to wait too long and discover that you have a gap that it's now much more challenging to close.
That's great, David. I was thinking about it, what would be the most important lesson from our experience with our past projects. And I think that would be that when you're changing the processes, you're changing the way that people are doing their jobs. And do not underestimate how much change management and you're going to need for this transformation, because you are transforming your business. You are not just implementing a new tool.
You make a good point, Jen. And I think for me, it's the broader picture as well. It's not just the SAP project itself. It's all of the other things that the SAP S/4HANA migration is actually impacting, right? It typically impacts every tool that you have. It impacts the ability to report out and get insights so that you can run the business. And so when you're planning, it's really important that change management is not just centered on the end user or the business consumer of SAP. It's much bigger than that. It is truly a transformational effort. And it's really important to look at every single audience that's impacted and figure out how to build them a right-sized change management plan that ensures your success.
Love it. Well, thank you all very much. I think this was awesome. I think there are folks that are going to have some questions and want to talk to you. So we'll make sure that if you want to learn more about what we do related to SAP, change management, OCM, all of those training, all of those things that we talked about on here, and everything that Insight does, visit us at solutions.insight.com. And thank you all very much. Thank you guys out there. Thanks for your comments, and thanks for joining us today. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.